Good evening. Welcome to Live from Prairie Lights. I'm Lindsay Park. Tonight, Heidi Pitlor will read to us and talk about her new book, The Daylight Marriage. The Daylight Marriage has received high praise from authors such as Tom Perrotta and Stephen King. Tom Perrotta says, "In The Daylight Marriage, there are two mysteries, the whereabouts of a missing woman and the vagaries of the human heart. Heidi Pitlor explores both of these enigmas with equal mastery, merging a shocking crime story with an incisive portrait of a failed marriage. The result is a novel that is fast-moving, emotionally complex, and ultimately heartbreaking." And Stephen King says, "The Daylight Marriage is hypnotically readable. I absolutely couldn't put it down. The structure is brilliant, and I turned the pages with increasing dread." This book is terrific. Heidi Pitlor grew up in Concord, Massachusetts. She got her BA from McGill University in Montreal and then lived for a time in Boulder, Colorado, where she worked as a nanny, receptionist, freelance writer, bus girl, rape crisis counselor, and counselor to homeless and runaway teenagers. She moved back to Massachusetts to earn her MFA in creative writing from Emerson College and worked as a temp at Houghton Mifflin Company. Soon after, she was hired as an editorial assistant in the company's trade division. She eventually became an editor and later a senior editor at Houghton Mifflin. She wrote fiction early in the mornings before work and published her first novel, The Birthdays, in 2006. She has been the series editor of the Best American Short Stories since 2007. She currently lives outside Boston with her husband and son and daughter. We're so happy to have her here today to read at Prairie Lights. Please welcome Heidi Pitlor.
Thanks, you guys. Oh, I might have to take a picture of you. This is a good crowd. So I have to just start out by saying thanks to Prairie Lights. I had this cool thing happen to me on the way here. Wow, this is perfectly at my height. It's like you knew how tall I am. So I get in this car. I'm staying out by the highway. And I get in this cab to come here. And I said, kind of tentatively, "Do you know, I don't know where I am. I'm like in this kind of haze of the book tour." And I said, "Do you know where Prairie Lights is?" And the guy said, "Who around here wouldn't know where Prairie Lights was?" And I went, "Oh, you do have no idea. I've never, that means so much to me." And it's like, yay, people still read. Because you hear a lot of bummer things too often. But I'm really happy to be here. I've never been in Iowa. I didn't go to Iowa. So it's really exciting to be here. So I thought I'm going to read a bit from my book, and then maybe we can talk afterwards. You can ask me questions, or I can just guess what questions you have. It's better if you ask. I'm going to read chapter 2. So I'll set up a little bit for you. The Daylight Marriage is about a couple who aren't getting along so well anymore. They are in their early 40s, and they have two kids. One is a 15-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. So chapter 1 is they get in this big fight, and then the next morning the wife disappears. And so chapter 2 is actually set on the day after that. So this is where we're going to pick up. There we go. 30 hours after he had kissed Hannah goodbye and headed off for work, Lovell waited, his chest pounding, on the front steps of a brick bunker, where, by a set of automatic glass doors, he met Bob Duncan, a short, doughy detective with sprawling black eyebrows and a crushing handshake. "You're not a small man," Duncan said, looking up at Lovell's face. "My parents are both tall," he said. At 6 feet 5 inches, he heard this sort of thing all the time, but it sounded kind of different now. He followed the detective into an overheated office, barely large enough for its desk and 2 metal chairs. Lovell had contacted the police himself this morning and reported her missing. He had no idea what else to do. Should he have come out and told the kids that she was quite likely in the process of leaving him? She had taken off once about a year ago and spent the night at her sister's, although she did return early the next morning before the kids woke. Duncan had already spoken with Janine and several of Lovell's co-workers, and Ethan and one of his teachers, who had seen Janine yesterday morning. Lovell knew that the detective had spoken to Sophie, a friend of Hannah's, whom Hannah had called that morning, and even a neighbor who had confirmed that Lovell's car had remained in the driveway during the nights before and after she went missing. Wasn't interrogating the neighbors and the rest of them a little much? A thought materialized. What if one of them had heard his and Hannah's exchange? What if the kids had said something to Duncan? The detective had called about an hour ago and had asked Lovell to come down to the station and bring one of Hannah's hairbrushes, one full of hair if you've got it. Duncan said that a bracelet, maybe hers, had turned up. A hairbrush, a bracelet. Lovell had thought that this was beginning to sound more like an investigation than a search effort. Now, Duncan said, just so you know, we found the bracelet on a beach in South Boston. Southie, Lovell said. Yep, the detective said. Carson Beach. Be right back. He left Lovell alone. Lovell dropped his eyes to the eggplant-colored carpet. The room was still. He had the sensation of standing alone in the eye of a storm. Every second of this grew stranger and more unnerving. He thought for some reason of Boston University and Hannah's long-ago ex, Doug Bowen. Neither had anything to do with South Boston, as far as he knew. Lovell had given Hannah several bracelets over the years. Had she gone for a walk and, thinking back on that last night, decided to heave one of them into the ocean? Duncan returned and handed Lovell a heavy plastic bag with a bracelet inside. The silver links, the small amber beads. He had gotten her this one for their last wedding anniversary. Lovell's mouth went dry. The detective waited, his thumbs dug into his pants pockets. Lovell set the bag on the desk. Yes, he finally said. Any reason she might have been in Southie? Duncan asked. I was just trying to figure that out. We don't know anyone there, he said. Duncan made his mouth impossibly small and clapped his hands together. One of the girls at the flower store. Hannah called her to say she was running late for work and because Janine was homesick. Janine wasn't homesick, Lovell said. We know. Hannah made the call from Boston. The detective said, You look a little sick yourself, Mr. Hall. Lovell blinked. Please call me Lovell. I have no idea where my wife is right now. I'm standing here in a police station identifying her bracelet. So yes, I don't feel so well. Do you have people searching South Boston? He asked. Can you give me your best guess why Hannah might have driven herself to Carson Beach? Duncan asked. I'm telling the truth, I have no idea, Lovell said. The argument might explain some part of what was going on right now, but certainly not everything. I assume you checked with her sister, her parents, he asked. We did, Duncan said. Well, I know you talked to her friend Sophie. None of them knew anything, Lovell said. Not a thing. Duncan cleared his throat. Geez, you really are tall. I guess Hannah's tall, too, for a woman, but not as big as you are. Lovell almost wished this man would come out and accuse him of something. If he admitted that they'd had an explosive exchange the night before she left, if Lovell admitted that Hannah may well be off somewhere planning her next move, deciding whether to even stay married to him, the police would probably halt their search, if they had even begun it. He would rather have them drive her back home to him than leave her alone out there, pissed off or defeated or distressed and vulnerable in some place that might not be all that safe. Any other insights you can give us? Duncan asked. I guess not, Lovell finally said. Need you to sign this, the detective said, beginning to shuffle through a stack of papers on his desk. He handed Lovell a ballpoint pen and a clipboard that held a triplicate form onto which his alibi had been typed. He had been at work during the time Hannah disappeared, save the 20 minutes he went out to grab lunch, and the brief time later when he had to get something he left in his car. Lovell signed his name. Duncan muttered his thanks and told them they would be in touch. That evening, Ethan came and crawled into his father's lap on the couch, though he hardly fit any more. Come sit with us, Lovell asked Janine, patting the space next to them. She sat across from them in an easy chair, with her chin resting on her knees. She shook her head, her eyes on the floor. She had been uncharacteristically subdued since yesterday. Her tangled, sand-colored hair fell around her face and down her shoulders. With her wide jaw and thin, jutting nose, she resembled Lovell more than Hannah. Ethan had inherited his mother's looks. I'm scared, Ethan finally said. Lovell wrapped his arms around his son, his heart thumping against Ethan's narrow back. I know, he said. He could not think how to set their minds at ease. Yesterday afternoon, Ethan's teacher phoned him at the office to ask why no one had come for pickup. He's been waiting here for an hour, she told him. Lovell hurried to close out of a labyrinthine power dissipation model at work and, perplexed and miffed, drove during the onset of rush hour to pick up Ethan. Lovell threw together a dinner of grilled cheese and deflected the kids' questions about Hannah in whatever way he could, trying to hide the wave of dread mounting within him. He surreptitiously peered around the kitchen and living room for some note or clue, a missing suitcase or toiletries. Her car was gone, her jacket and purse too, but nothing else as far as he could tell. He assured the kids that she would probably show up soon, or at least call. Of course she would. She had probably forgotten about some old friend's birthday, he told them, or a dinner with her sister. The two met for dinner or drinks every month or so. The kids appeared to buy it, as did Lovell to some extent after a while. If you can, try not to worry, he told them. After 3 games of Boggle and a repeat episode of Nova, after more secret searches of every room in the house, including their basement, he ushered the kids upstairs to bed and promised to send Hannah directly to their rooms the minute she got home so that she could kiss them goodnight. He kept his arms tight around Ethan's now. A commercial for Mr. Clean was on the TV. Janine picked at a Band-Aid around her finger. "How come it's always women in these ads for cleaning shit?" she said. "Language," Lovell said. "No men clean their houses?" "That's a woman's job," Lovell tried to joke. She saw everything in black and white, and sometimes it was difficult not to parody. "You're hilarious," she deadpanned. It was unfortunately true. He rarely picked up a mop or a broom. "That policeman asked me what we talked about in the car when she drove me to school that morning," Ethan said. He wriggled free from Lovell's arms. "And where I thought she might be, like a million questions about all the places she goes and people she sees and why, like he thought I was keeping something secret." He went back to the beanbag that he had brought downstairs from his bedroom. "They did?" Lovell said. "Did they ask you anything about our family or about me? Just whether you guys ever fought or anything." "What did you say?" "I don't know," Ethan said. Janine watched Lovell. "I said I guess so, that sometimes you guys argued," Ethan said. Lovell exhaled. He supposed Ethan could have said worse. Ethan or Janine may well have heard only pieces of what was said, pieces that without context would have sounded awful. Lovell was too often mistaken by members of his family for what he was not, self-absorbed rather than thoughtful, blunt, not honest, impatient, not logical. What had Janine told the policeman? Lovell was afraid to ask her. They watched TV quietly for a while, but he could hardly sit still. He hated that he was forced to view his own kids with suspicion right now. He hated that he was secretly agonizing about himself. If nothing else, he reminded himself he had his alibi. Southie, Carson Beach. It was not a place where Hannah would have gone. She would have driven to Gloucester or Rockport, where she and Sophie used to go in college, if she wanted a walk on the beach. He finally rose and went to the kitchen. Had she ever gone to Carson while at BU? He estimated the distance from her parents' old townhouse to the beach. He scrubbed spots of Janine's yogurt off the kitchen counter and then swept the tile floor. He made his way to the front hall and paced, back and forth, his head down, his eyes on his feet. When he looked up, a beam of light poured through the window by the door. A woman with a microphone was standing on the sidewalk, a cameraman next to her. Was that Susan Spurk from the local news? Strange. He remembered that a house a few blocks away had burned down just the other week. Maybe there was another fire in the neighborhood. He switched on the porch light and moved closer to the window. She met his eyes and moved down his front walk toward him. "What is this?" he said. She was shorter in person than he might have thought, stout and pink-faced, her fine tan hair cut in a severe bob. She lifted the microphone up and beside her head. The man who carried the cumbersome black camera scrambled to catch up with her. Lovell stepped outside. "Lovell Hall," she said into her microphone. She introduced herself briefly. "What do you think happened to your wife?" She held the top of the microphone toward him. The man behind her hefted the camera onto his shoulder and began to film. Had Bob Duncan or someone else at the police station told her about Hannah? "Hold on," Lovell finally said. He closed the door behind him before the kids could see or hear any more and turned back to her. "I wish I knew," he said. "What have the police told you?" she asked. I probably shouldn't," he said. "What do you know?" The cameraman shifted on his feet. "Where were you when she went missing?" Susan Spurk continued. "What?" he managed. Can you tell me where you were that day? I don't believe I'm required to tell you that, he said. He added, but I was at work, at my office in Cambridge. You can call the police if you'd like to confirm it. We'll do that. Do the police have any leads? She asked. I don't know. I mean, none that I know of, he said. Well, what do you know? She asked. The kids would be wondering where he was. For all he knew, they were standing in the front hallway watching this through the window beside the door. I have to get back to my family, he finally said. The police can answer any other questions. Good night. He moved back inside and closed the door behind him, thoroughly rattled, trying to understand exactly what had just happened and what this entailed. If only he could know that Hannah was at least, if nothing else, safe. Janine appeared at the other end of the hallway, peering past him to see what was outside. It was someone from Channel 6, he said slowly. What did they want? She asked. Oh, well, they somehow heard about Mom and just wanted to make sure we were doing okay, he said. No big deal. Were you actually on TV? She asked. Well, they did ask me a couple of questions, he said. How did they know about this? Did something happen to Mom? What the fuck, Dad? She said. He took a few steps toward her. News reporters try to turn everything into a story. Their showing up here doesn't mean a thing. Listen, Mom will be fine. She'll come back soon. I really hope so, she said. She drew a lock of her hair through and out the side of her mouth. You didn't tell me if you were on TV. Well, they interviewed me, he said, but who knows if they'll actually air it. I didn't really have much to say. I'm sure they'll see there's no real news story here and dump the 2 minutes of footage they got of me. She appeared to consider and accept what he had said. So what do we do now? She asked. He thought a moment. Get ready for bed? It's only 8:30, she said. What about your homework? Most evenings he spent at the kitchen table behind his computer or talking on the phone to researchers in Perth or Hong Kong, where the time difference made it impossible to speak during his workday. Apparently, he only had a vague sense of his children's typical nights. Tomorrow is Saturday, she said. All right, he said, gesturing for Ethan nearby on his beanbag to join him. Let's see if there's a movie on TV. He flicked around, trying to find something that would appeal to their different ages and tastes, something calming or funny. But since it was October, all he could find were horror movies. Perfect, Lovell said, as on the screen, Anthony Hopkins sucked the air through his teeth. Lovell poked the off button on the remote again and again, but the batteries must have died. Jesus Christ, he said. Language, said Ethan. Lovell finally stood and pressed the power button below the screen. Who wants to play Uno? He said weakly. Okay, we're going to keep reading. In the morning, Susan Spurk had gone, but a couple of news vans were now parked across the street, across from his house. Thankfully, it was a Saturday, and Janine and Ethan could stay home. They had all shared his bed last night, and none of them had gotten much rest. So Lovell let the kids sleep in and went downstairs to call Duncan. Any updates on the case? Nothing to tell, Duncan said. A reporter came by last night, Lovell said, and now some more are parked on our street. I haven't talked to any of them, Duncan said, but I guess I'm not all that surprised. Some bored cop with a big mouth, you know, the prettier the lady, the wider the coverage. Lovell winced. I'll talk to the guys, Duncan said. I'd appreciate it, Lovell said. He glanced out his living room window as 2 more news vans pulled up behind the others. And if you wouldn't mind giving me a heads up next time you talk to my kids, I'd appreciate that as well. They're pretty freaked out right now, Lovell added. We all are. I'll do what I can, Duncan said. Oh, and Lovell, if I were you, I wouldn't talk to any more reporters. Just ignore them if you can. Pretend they're not there. Are you kidding? Lovell nearly said. How easy it must be to dole out glib advice at times like these. The phone rang throughout the day. Hannah's parents and sister, each with rapid-fire questions about when he had last seen her and orders to check this place and that. Of course I checked the shop, he said, and suggestions for others that he might not have considered. Her closest friends called, a few of his co-workers who had seen the news. His mother called and asked him whether he might be forgetting some place where Hannah liked to go. Why does everyone say that? It's not as if you're going to suddenly jog my memory by making me feel like an idiot, he said. Lovell, she said. Janine sat across the room, eyeing him. I'm sorry, he said. This isn't easy. How are the kids doing? His mother tried. Are people really asking you why you don't know more? Mom. No one in his immediate family, his mother, father, or brother, was particularly sensitive. They were all academics, such logical people, tortoises whose shells shut away their hearts, feeble from such infrequent use, deep within them, and allowed only their heads, their brains out in the wide, strange world to make sense of it all. Anyway, his mother knew nothing of the state of his marriage, other than the little friction that she had witnessed herself, from what he could remember. Just a few hushed arguments that she would never have registered. "I'm headed to Costco," she said after a moment. "You want me to bring you toilet paper or anything?" "I have no idea," he said automatically. "I'm not the one who inventories the stuff." "I'll just get you some. You can never have too much," she said. Everyone who had heard that Hannah disappeared called that day, it seemed, but Detective Duncan. There had to have been 10 vans outside his house by the time the sun began to set, maybe more. Lovell went for a bottle of Grey Goose. He stood in the front hallway, watching a circle of people chat beside his mailbox. Susan Spurk appeared at the side of the group, a cell phone to her ear. Someone next to her nodded toward the front door, and Lovell moved back before any of the reporters could see him. Thank you. Okay, gulp. All right, questions? Concerns? There's always, the first one's always so hard to get going, right? I think I should have a question that I ask myself.
I could start with one.
Oh, good.
Heidi, did your editorial experience make the process of getting this book published different? I mean, did someone else edit your work, or did you edit it to perfection and then they just said?
Well, I thought I edited it to perfection, and then it got completely ripped apart. You know, it's tough to be your own editor. I think this book was a really tricky one to get right, and it took me years and years, and it was a much longer book, and there was a lot of happier stuff around it that ultimately had to go. So I went through a lot to get it right. It took me a long time, and went through 2 editors, 2 agents. So yeah, you know, it was really hard for me to sort of let it be this dark, uncomfortable book. But by the end of it, I would have let it be anything just to be done with it. But I do think it was the right, it is the right, it's the book that it needed to be in the end. I just wasn't brave enough to sort of let it be what it is. But I have a really great editor. I'm really lucky. We both wanted it to sort of be the same thing. I wasn't quite aware of what that was going to look like in the end, but she really helped me. And a good editor is worth so much. I'm not really an editor anymore. So what I do is I read a lot and pick stuff, but I'm not really a hands-on editor anymore. I used to be. So I think I learned a lot from doing that, but now I'm kind of in a different place in life.
I see.
If that makes sense. Go ahead.
Speaking more about that editor, speaking about the editing process, where was your editor someone suggested by the publisher or your agent, or what was the sequence in?
Sure.
And was it different with the first agent than the second agent?
Oh, I've had a long checkered past. Let's see. So yeah, so what usually happens is you send out a book and you find an agent that wants to work with you. The agent submits the manuscript, sometimes part of a book or sometimes a whole book. And then if an editor or 2 or however many like it, they'll come forward and you talk to them and you see who you click with, who you think gets the book in the best way, who will do the most marketing and publicity. So my first editor was the editor for The Birthdays. Was my previous editor, and she's wonderful, but I think she kind of wanted a different book, which made sense. She wanted kind of a safer book, and I tried to please her for a while, and I just felt like we were playing tug of war in a funny way that didn't quite work out. So it just was one of those, it's not you, it's me, we had to part ways. So my second go around, and I won't even get into the agent part because that's just boring logistics, but so my second one, I think we just clicked for this book. It's funny, every book is such a different process. My first one was really different, and this book is its own beast, so it kind of needed its own people, I think. So yeah, your agent ends up sort of playing matchmaker, and they think, oh, I know this editor would like this, or, you know, would like this for certain reasons, and then you sign the contract and you go back and forth and hope that you will be done sooner than later. And the publisher just sort of takes over and you just follow along. You're their employee after a while, and that's that's where I'm at right now. I kind of go where they tell me to go. They're doing a great job. I couldn't be happier. Yay, Algonquin Books. They're a little publisher. Well, they're not. They're a small-ish publisher out of North Carolina with an office in New York. But I love them. They're great. I do nothing but sing their praises. Go ahead.
The first question I have is pretty typical. Were there any events in your life that led up to you writing this book? Like, was there anything that happened to you that inspired you to write this?
Sure. Yeah, there were a few things. One is I really wanted to write a page turner after my last book, which was more of a family drama. I really wanted to. I read a lot. So my day job is, just to give you the 2-second nutshell, I'm the series editor of Best American Short Stories. I read what feels like 1 billion short stories a year. I pick 120, and then I work with a guest editor to pick 20 that appear in the book. So I read a ton. Oh, hello. I read a ton, and I read a lot of stories where not much happens. And not a lot happened in my first book, so that was thing one. I really wanted something big and dramatic to happen in this book, and to keep readers turning pages. And then around that time, I started getting the idea for it. This was how long ago it was. Lacey Peterson was in the news a lot. You might not have been alive then. No, you probably were. And I don't mean that as an insult. That's just more how old I am, not how young you were. So there are all these stories of these beautiful women who went missing that started cropping up. There was the woman in D.C. Of course, I can't think of any other now. There was Carolyn Kennedy Bissett had been all over the news before that. And I just started feeling like every time I open the newspaper, there's a beautiful woman who's gone missing and something awful has happened to her. And why are we as a culture so interested in that? So I kind of thought, well, it might be interesting to explore the cultural side of it. And then a couple weeks after I started it, my husband and I lived in this small town, and a woman and her baby were shot by her husband, like 1.5 miles, 2 miles from our house. And the press descended upon the town, and the house was taped off, and I found myself completely drawn into this case. And I thought, wow, at the same time I thought, okay, get a life. You don't need to be into this. This is not your business. But I couldn't, it was just fascinating to me. That is not what happens in this book. But this whole sort of archetype of a story got under my skin, and I found myself kind of creeping further into it. And although the media is a part of this book, it really becomes about these specific characters. And I think that's always the way with the book. You go in one door, and then you're in a house that you didn't quite plan on entering, but there you are. So yeah, that's where it came from.
And my second question is, what kind of background research did you have to do for this? I mean, from what I've gathered from chapter 2, there's some, criminal investigation and stuff. Not necessarily criminal, but there is investigation. Did you have to research that?
I did so much research that I didn't end up using. So I did. I met with the DA. I talked to some victim advocates in my state. I did a lot of research online, read books on that side of it. But I also, the husband is a climatologist. He's a climate scientist. So I did a ton of research on global warming, actually. And what he does is he studies the connection between hurricanes and global warming, whether, global warming causes more extreme weather. So I did very random. Those are the two areas I researched most. And then there's all of the weird little stuff you find yourself researching. The wife is a florist, so I researched flowers, research is really just a way of procrastinating a lot of times. I would say, what does this flower mean? And then I think, all right, get back to work, or maybe we should grow those. Okay. So beware, if you write, beware of research. It can be it feels like a loophole. You think, but I'm allowed to do all this because it's writing. Even if it won't go in the book ever. Go ahead.
This is just sort of a random thing I was wondering. It's not about this book, but with your first book, did you start writing it because you wanted to be an author, or did you start writing it just as a random thing you were doing and it turned into a thing?
That's such a great question. I love that. Let me think a minute. Well, so I went to grad school. Probably because I wanted to be an author, which feels really embarrassing to admit. I don't know why. It just feels dorky. But I think I did. I'm just going to come out and say it. Wanted to be an author. So I went to grad school, got a job at a publishing company, because in grad school I tried to teach and it was no good. I'm not so much a teacher. So I worked at a publishing company, and then I had written a lot in grad school. I got an MFA in writing. So it was sort of there, and then I started that book right after 9/11 because I was really antsy. I think the whole country was, and I just wanted to commit to something, and I'd been writing stories, and I just had this sudden urge to do something longer and probably be an author. I think I'd always wanted to be one. And I think I wanted to be one when I was younger because I thought, I like the idea that you don't have to care what you look like. I think when I was little, I wanted to be an actress or a model, like a lot of girls. And then I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to have that sort of thing. But this is cool because you can wear pajamas and stay at home and like eat all day. And now that I've done that for a lot of years, it's kind of overrated, not so good for the mental health. So I try and get out and go to libraries and stuff and work because too many years at home in pajamas does not make for a sane mind. First-hand knowledge here. Anyone else have any other questions? Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about, in terms of the short story sort of publication, can you talk a little bit about how you curate what you're looking for, what you see that you're not looking for, that sort of thing?
Definitely. So, and that's a really good question too. So I try to be really open-minded. I read everything. I read everything that's published in this country that's not an excerpt by an American writer. So how I curate that is I'm really picky. I'm really impatient. But I don't have any rules anymore. I feel like the more I do it, the fewer rules I have. I kind of used to be this person. When I started the job, I used to have all these little things that I hated. Like I hated second person, which is, you go to the store, you read that. I kind of thought, like hipster stuff I wasn't so into. I kind of liked realism. And the more I read, the more I thought, you just can't even do that. It's tough because there's always good writing that will be in second person. Or hipster, dare I say. And I've really learned to kind of let go of some of my prejudices. I try to, I'm incredibly judgmental but open at the same time, if that makes any sense. I have my bad days. It's funny because I work with someone different every year, and there are the people that are very confident, the guest editors, and say, this is my list and that's that. And then there are the people that are just haunted. Like, what if I miss a good one? What? And I have to sort of say, you will. And we're not perfect. We're people. We're not machines, thank God. Someday maybe a machine will do my job, and that will be a big bummer. But you have to kind of let yourself make mistakes and go with your gut a lot. I'm not even answering anything, am I? What do I like? I like confident writing. I like bold writing, not for the sake of being bold, but natural writing. American short fiction needs to be way more diverse. It needs to be way funnier. I would love that. I would like to read way more about difference, about, not the same people. I think I would like to read more about poor people. I think there's a huge segment of this country that's not writing short fiction that I wish was. I always, if it's something new, it always gets bonus points. But then if it's like, oh yeah, we're being new for the sake of being new, I have a pretty good radar for that. I think we need to see a lot of gay and trans writing. There needs to be way more of that out there. It's really, every year I get it's so white, it's so this, and I say, that is right. You should see what I read. I would love nothing more than for American short fiction to be more diverse. And so in that vein, and I'm going to sound like I'm plugging this book, which I am, another book. This is a crazy year for me. So there's, I have this novel out. I have the annual Best American Short Stories, and it's the 100th anniversary of the Best American Short Stories. So in October, Houghton Mifflin's publishing a book called 100 Years of the Best American Short Stories. So I had to go back and read all of the books, which, for the first 60 to 70 years were whiter and wealthier than you can imagine. So, but it was really interesting to see the writing begin to change, and it's happened too late, but it's happened. So the book ends up being kind of a story of very slow diversification, but there's still a long way to go on that front. And so there's room, I think, for people to still write new things and try new things.
Heidi, I have a couple things I'd like
Sure.
to say. I enjoyed the book. And,
Thank you.
I found what really struck me more so than the crime aspect of it was the discontent. It was like a portrait of discontent in this
Yeah.
marriage, and it created vulnerability.
Yeah.
And things can go one way or the other, many ways, and,
Right.
and that was kind of dizzying. I really, really appreciated that.
Yeah.
The other thing is a question, because it just so happened that my reading of your book closely followed my reading of Gone Girl.
Oh, God.
And I just wondered if you read that book or when that book came out, if that like threw you for a loop, or if that had any effect on you and the course of your book or whatever, without spoiling plot.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's a fair question. So I've been I started this book in 2005, and I don't know exactly when Gone Girl came out. 7, 8, something like that. But I was far enough into this book that I was in it and working on it. It was under contract, and I still remember the fateful day of someone sending me. It was like a PW, a small trade review of like, look at this book that's coming out. That sounds exactly like yours. And I went, what? All right. Great. So I went out and bought it and read it and, was kind of like traumatized for 5 minutes and then realized there's such different books. And I remember calling my agent and thinking, what, he's like, oh, this book won't do anything. Don't worry about it. And then it was like the monster that ate Manhattan or something. I was like, wow, this is your worst nightmare as a writer. You're writing this nice little psychological book and there comes Gone Girl, They're such different books. I loved Gone Girl. It's a thriller. It's a mystery. It's a, hold on to your seat kind of thing. I think mine is darker in a way and more psychological and more sad. They feel like they have the same premise and other than that are completely different books. So I kind of, no one else seemed to have a problem with it. I do remember saying at one point, the movie came out when we were in production for this book, and I kind of joked with my publisher, can you guys maybe make a sticker saying conceived of and written before Gone Girl and stick it on the front of my book? And they were like, maybe. But so, it is out there. There are other books that are sort of like it too. It's a total bummer, I won't lie. But I think they're so different and no one who has read my book has said, gee, they're so similar. I mean, everyone says, oh yeah, they're such, different, hugely different books. She's an edgy writer. I'm probably not as much. So I feel okay about it, but it's a question I get, and it's and again, my preference would be to say, maybe it'll sell like Gone Girl. Like we can just take that part of Gone Girl and just tuck the rest away. I still, I'm still working on that.
Thank you. That's great.
Sure.
Answers.
Thank you.
More questions or comments
Else have a question?
for Heidi?
I really like the cover art.
Yeah, isn't it
Could you speak
great?
to that or to the title as well?
Thank you. Thank you. The title was mine, and the first title was, it took forever to come up with, and we finally came up with what I thought was a great title, and then again, because really it's just that I'm so brilliant, and then other brilliant people, Jennifer Weiner, I never know how to pronounce her name, had a book called We All Fall Down, which was the name of this. And I thought, oh man, I can really pick them here. So inadvertently ripping everyone off, or pre-ripping, I don't even know. So we put that away. We went through a million more. My publisher didn't love it, but they came around. I really liked it. To me, it kind of symbolizes, this book is kind of like an X-ray of a marriage, and there's a lot of light and darkness imagery. And I like the idea of it, not everything is what it seems on the outside. It's really, my indoor again was the idea that marriage is this taboo subject in our culture. You can never talk about it, and especially the cases where something bad happens to the woman and the man is accused. I always think it's not what it looks like from the outside. So that dissonance was interesting to me, and the cover. I loved it too. It was like the weirdest thing because it's never having been an editor. I mean, covers are hell. The author never likes them. And I still remember I was on vacation with my family in Colorado. We had just gone whitewater rafting and we were like soaking wet, muddy. And because I'm a total addict with my phone, we got out of the boat and I checked my phone, and my editor had sent me the cover, and I was like, what? You know, I didn't know what it was, and then I thought, I love it. It's just so rare. You never see a cover that you like. And I sort of tried to, I said, can we just, shorten the stem and the glass? And they said, yeah, no, you get no say. Maybe you do if you're J.K. Rowling, but I am not she. And this was what I got. But I was really happy, and I think it's really cool and tweaked and is right for the book. So it was good. I was lucky. Anyone else have any questions? Can I take a picture of you guys? You're going to be my first audience. Because I don't know anyone here. This is the first reading where I haven't known anyone, and it makes me feel like, yay. That's good. I didn't have to drag my entire family and neighborhood out. So exciting. Okay, you guys have to look good here. Come on. Smile, look happy, hold up your books or something. All right. Also, I'm in Iowa, which is cool. Is anyone here in the writing program, or did that get out for the summer? Yay! All right. I can't get back far enough. I think I got to go like this. All right. Thanks, you guys. Here, I'm going to have to do this. All right. I know I'm kind of a dork. I own it. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.